In late 18th century Hampshire, the Austen children grew up inside a working country parish where daily life followed clear patterns and clear expectations. Their father served as the local clergyman, and that job tied the family to neighbours who watched, judged, and remembered. Visits mattered, manners mattered. Reputation mattered most. In that small world, children listened more than they spoke, and they learned early how adults measured one another. Yet the home also ran on words. Books passed through hands, were read aloud, argued over, and turned into opinions at the table. Conversation became training, not just entertainment. It taught what counted as clever, what sounded improper, and what had to be left unsaid. For a sharp child, this created a puzzle. People sounded reasonable, but they often acted from pride, fear, or money. The rules looked polite, the motives rarely were. Young Jane watched that gap and needed a way to handle it. She could not correct adults, and she could not ignore what she noticed. So she began to shape it into stories, privately at first, as if putting order on a page made the world easier to read. On paper, she controlled timing and consequence. She could test what happened when someone flattered or pretended or hoped too much. Storytelling became her quiet method for understanding power. In the 1780s, Jane reached her teenage years and stopped treating stories as a private game. She practiced. She wrote short, bold pieces that later readers called her juvenilia, early work but not timid work. These pages moved through the family like shared entertainment, passed around, read, remembered. The audience stayed small, but the pressure stayed real. If a joke landed, she knew. If it failed, she learned fast. What emerged in these writings was not just talent, but a voice. It sounded comic, but it also sounded precise, as if she listened closely to how people actually behaved and then trimmed away every excuse they used for it. She pushed situations to extremes to show what polite manners tried to hide. The humour did not float on sweetness. It cut. And it revealed a teenager already testing how far honesty could go. Most strikingly, she stayed wary of easy emotion. When a story tried to lean on pure sentiment, tearful goodness, dramatic suffering, perfect virtue, she poked at it until it looked unstable. That skepticism mattered. It trained her to doubt the expected response and to search for the sharper one underneath. Inside the family circle, these playful pieces built a habit. She watched, she judged, she revised. Her style took its first clear shape. In the 1790s, Jane Austen stopped treating fiction as a quick game and started building something bigger. She drafted full-length stories, the early shapes of what later became Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Northanger Abbey. This mattered because longer work demanded different skills. A sketch could land a joke and end. A novel had to hold attention, carry cause and effect, and keep people's choices believable. As the pages grew, her focus sharpened on the engines that moved real lives, courtship and money. Love did not float free in her plots. It ran into rules, expectations, and plain arithmetic. Who had an income, who lacked one, who could offer security, and who could not. She arranged events so small social moments produced large consequences. One misunderstanding could delay a match. One fortune could change every option. And now she committed to the novel as her main form, not as an experiment, but as a mission. She shaped each story around limits that women faced and could not simply talk away. Without property, without independent earnings, a future often depended on marriage or family support. That constraint became her structure. It forced decisions, exposed motives, and raised the stakes behind polite conversation. Romance stayed present, but reality set the terms. Around 1802, Jane's life stopped feeling predictable. Family arrangements shifted, and with them came a quiet warning. Comfort could vanish quickly. For an unmarried woman, there were only a few accepted ways to stay secure, and most depended on other people's money. That pressure did not sit in the background anymore. It pressed in close, and it made every social visit, every introduction, and every expectation feel heavier than before. Then came a proposal. It did not arrive as a grand romance, but as an offer of safety, the kind many women felt pushed to accept. It promised a settled home and freedom from worry if she traded personal choice for stability. Jane considered it, and the decision showed how real the stakes were. She refused. In that moment she accepted uncertainty on purpose, and she placed principle and feeling above the simple relief of being provided for. After that, the question behind her novel stopped being theoretical. She had lived the hard version of it. What did love mean when rent and food depended on marriage, and when saying no could narrow a life? That experience tightened the moral screws inside her stories. A match for money no longer seemed like a harmless plot device. It became a test of character and a measure of how society quietly forced people to bargain with their own futures. In 1805, Jane Austen's father died, and the small structure that had held the family together fell away with him. Jane, her mother, and her sister faced a simple new problem: where to live and how to pay for it. They depended on relatives and temporary arrangements. Plans changed. Addresses changed. Under that pressure, writing stopped being a daily habit and became something squeezed into the margins. Those years brought movement without control. The women relocated more than once, following what money and family support allowed, not what they wanted. Each move meant starting over with routines, contacts, and expenses. The uncertainty wore down the steady focus that long novels required. Jane still observed people and kept her sharp sense of how money shaped choices. But she produced less on the page. Survival came first. Then stability arrived from the direction that mattered most: a fixed home. In 1809, Jane, her mother, and her sister settled at Chawton Cottage. It gave them a dependable base and a clearer budget, which changed everything about time and attention. Jane no longer had to write around constant disruption. She returned to earlier manuscripts, revised with patience, and began pushing unfinished work toward completion. By 1811, the work that had lived as pages passed around family circles stepped into the public world. Sense and Sensibility appeared in print, but not under her name. It stood by a lady, a small phrase that protected her and limited her. Still, it changed everything. The book sold. Strangers read her. For the first time, writing stopped being only a private skill and became paid labor. Publication brought a new kind of pressure. A book in the market had to survive reviews, gossip, and the slow verdict of readers. Money mattered now too, not as a prize, but as proof that the work had value beyond the household. She watched the numbers, the demand, the publisher's choices, and what success might fund next. Anonymity helped her stay safe, but it also meant she could not fully claim the win. Then, in 1813, Pride and Prejudice followed, and the notice grew louder. More people wanted the novel, and more people talked about it, even if they could not say who wrote it. Each new reader widened her reach and raised the stakes. Praise could travel fast, so could ridicule. She had become something new in her life, a professional author, earning her way, building an audience, and living with the risk of being judged in public. In 1814, her next novel appeared, and it surprised many readers who expected only bright courtship comedy. The story still watched manners closely, but it also pressed on uncomfortable questions. Who held power in a household, and what did that power allow? What counted as right conduct when polite society preferred not to notice harm? Her writing tightened too. Scenes connected with a firmer chain of cause and effect. Nothing drifted. Then, in 1815, she followed with another novel that looked lighter on the surface, but it cut just as deep. The focus turned towards self-deception, how people convinced themselves they acted kindly while they managed and judged everyone around them. The moral stakes came from small choices, repeated until they became a pattern. Her control of structure grew clearer here. Each misunderstanding set up the next consequence, and the ending felt earned, not rescued. As these books circulated, something else shifted. Her name still did not appear on the title pages, yet her reputation travelled beyond the usual circle of novel readers. Word moved through friends, relatives, and the talk of drawing rooms, until people with social weight took notice. Elite readers treated her as more than a pleasant diversion. They recognized craft, nerve, and intelligence. For a woman who published quietly, this wider attention mattered. It changed how far her work could reach. By 1816, she reached a turning point. She finished Persuasion, a novel that looked back as much as it looked forward. The story carried fewer easy comforts and more patience with regret, delay, and second chances. She worked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she could do. But time tightened, her health weakened, and writing stopped being only a daily habit. It became a race against her own body. The change did not arrive as a single collapse. It came as limits. Energy ran out sooner. Days that once held steady work narrowed into shorter, uneven stretches. That pressure reshaped what she put on the page. The late voice sounded more direct, more stripped down, and more aware of what people lost by waiting. She still planned, still drafted, still revised. Yet every plan now depended on whether she felt well enough to continue. Even so, she started again. Sanditon began as a new project aimed at fresh targets and new social habits, with the same sharp control she had built over years. But illness became the main constraint on her output, not publishers, not money, not confidence. The work moved forward, then broke off. The consequence landed hard. Artistic maturity arrived at the same moment her strength failed, leaving ambition unfinished and the record of what might have followed. In 1817, the work slowed for good. Jane Austen died at 41, before she could see what her last years had set in motion. The novels that had travelled into the world without her name now faced a new problem. What happened to an author's reputation when the author was gone? Her family did not leave it to chance. They took control of what readers would learn and when. They prepared 2 books for publication together, Northanger Abbey, written years earlier, and Persuasion, finished at the end. These were not simply new titles on a list. They were a statement that the work deserved a future. For the first time, the front matter included a short biographical notice. It did one decisive thing. It said her name clearly in public. That single act changed the shape of her career, even after death. Until then, readers had praised the novels while the writer stayed hidden behind anonymity. Now, Jane Austen existed as a public identity, someone people could point to, discuss, and remember. The books stopped being clever stories by an unnamed hand and started becoming a body of work attached to a life. Recognition began, slowly, from that moment. Her books no longer belonged to one country or one century. They travelled. They got translated, assigned in classrooms, and carried from reader to reader until the stories became shared reference points. Then another change followed. The novels stopped living only on the page. They moved into films and television, again and again, each version choosing what to emphasize and what to soften. The adaptations created new doorways in. Some viewers arrived through a romantic comedy tone, others came through sharper, modern retellings. And when the official versions ended, audiences kept going. Fan fiction expanded side characters, rewrote endings, and relocated the plots to new places and times. The result mattered. Austen's world stayed active, not preserved, and new readers kept entering. As the audience grew, the arguments around her grew too. Scholars kept disputing what her irony really attacked, what her stories approved, and where she stood on power, class, and women's choices. Meanwhile, tourism and publishing turned her name into an industry. It all traced back to those early private observations in a quiet parsonage. Small beginnings produced a permanent global presence.